All right. Good afternoon. It is July 9th, 2025. Last night, I was privileged enough through a Prime membership to go to an early screening of the new James Gunn Superman movie that launches the DCU cinematically. Because if anyone is a nerd like me, you know the DCU, I guess, officially launched with Creature Commandos back in December, an animated series. And even before that, probably with Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad, since bits of that film and that show are going to carry over into the DCU. So, anyway, Superman 2025, written, produced, directed by James Gunn, starring David Corn Sweat. Happy belated birthday. His birthday was yesterday. Nicholas Holt, Rachel Brosnahan, and a whole slew of other people who really kind of bring their A game even to the smaller roles. Now, does this film succeed? I would say yes. I'm going to try to be spoiler free. I mean, it's a Superman movie, so you can guess. There's certain tropes at this point after 87 years that I think most people know about Superman. Although this Superman is uh, you learn this in the very beginning through text on the screen, so it's probably not much of a spoiler for the actual film since you learn it before anything really happens. It's 3 years since Superman outed himself to the public as a metahuman being. So he's been around for 3 years. So the Superman is, I'll say, depowered in a way that, like, since he's only been around for, let's say, 30 years, and that's from, infant to adulthood, he's not going to have the same power level he will at like 300 years because he won't be soaking in, he hasn't been soaking in that solar energy for as long as he would when he's 300. So that's what I believe the rationale is for if you've seen any trailers and it looks like, hey, Superman, he's hurt. Yeah, because he's still strong and can fly and pretty much invulnerable, but there's caveats in the film that you would see. Anyone who knows Superman knows back in the 40s during the radio show, they created kryptonite in order to have Superman subdued for a certain period of time so the voice actor who did his voice, Bud Collyer, could go on vacation. That is why kryptonite was invented, and then they introduced it in the comic books. So anyway, does James Gunn know what he's doing when it comes to superhero films? We can look at the Guardians films and say yes, but I believe James Gunn said that he doesn't technically consider them to be superhero films because they're more like space adventurers than they are actual heroes. And the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, obviously, those characters kind of live in like a gray area. Like, if they do anything good in the Suicide Squad or Peacemaker, it's because they're making amends for whatever bad they did before. So I could see how this is technically his first foray into superhero cinema. And I like the idea of the, uh, I'd say, younger Superman, because it's not an origin story. And that's great. So we jump into it in the middle of the action. So any epic poetry fans out there, in medias res, and you sort of get bits and pieces of a backstory, but as even a casual viewer would know, Superman's story is so well known at this point that if you need to have it be retold again and again, there might be something wrong with you as a viewer if you can't comprehend now that an immigrant rises to prominence as the most famous person in the world. So, so the film follows Superman through a few days of his life and how he juggles work, relationships, and extracurricular activities. The extracurricular, obviously, being his time as Superman. And he's still trying to find himself and who he is and how his values as a farm boy. They never specifically say Kansas, but everyone knows it's Smallville, Kansas. How his values conflict with the rest of the world. So it's almost as if the movie is trying to find relevance for a character who is older and sees the world as black and white when it is now mostly gray. In that respect, it reminds me, I think Joe Kelly wrote a really great, I think it's Action Comics 775 from back in like 2000. There's a story called What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And it deals with this super team coming in and they're more violent and willing to kill. And Superman isn't. And that issue, and it's incredible because it deals with how the world embraces these violent new superheroes and kind of makes Superman feel like he's old hat and almost redundant, I guess. Like his worldview is old because the threats keep getting worse. Why don't you just get rid of it? And that issue deals with the emergence of the elite, who is a pastiche of the Authority, a really popular comic book at the time, and how Superman gets called out by them and then deals with them in a way where he doesn't kill them. They want him to commit murder, and they're trying to force that from him, and he refuses to, and he outsmarts them. So it's sort of the old brains beats brawn kind of thing, and Superman has both brains and brawn. So some of this film reminded me of that as far as introducing newer heroes that may not necessarily be like as violent as the elite were in the comics, but at least they show like a more willingness to go to that darker place that Superman isn't willing to go to because of how he was raised and what he believes he is here to do. He's not here to harm anyone. He's here to help people. And the film puts him through many trials, many Herculean trials. And, you have your familiar plot points, like Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor is incredible. And Lex Luthor, much like in the Man of Steel series, like Batman versus Superman and Justice League, you see Lex Luthor as a modern day tech jagoff, let's say. And that's how he was portrayed in Batman versus Superman. He was more of a Mark Zuckerberg type in Batman versus Superman, and in Superman, he's more of I'll say like an Elon Musk type of technocrat. Let's say, the billionaire interfering with world politics in order to get what he wants from whatever. And just, this film was obviously written maybe 2 years ago. So it was before any of this stuff happened. So if anything in the film seems kind of relevant and pertinent, I'm sure it's honestly all by accident. And so there are some political things in it, like they question Superman's motives for violating like international airspace or whatever, and things come up in his relationship with Lois. Lois knows he's Superman, just so you know, because she is a great reporter, and they're not going to dumb down the character to make viewers feel better, like as like they used to. And so he's dealing with a lot of things and a lot of people. He's juggling a lot. You see, he's not as alone and solitary as in other Superman films because there are other heroes like the Justice Gang, which is Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, and the Guy Gardner version of Green Lantern. Metamorpho is in it at one point. He's another hero who I believe they did a really good job in Beware the Batman, a cartoon show from about 12 years ago that's on Max that Glenn Murakami did after Teen Titans. Incredible show. If you want to look at his backstory, if you're not a comic book reader, they do a really good job with him. And they introduce a fuller world where Superman isn't alone. So if there's any complaints about like this movie being like lighter in tone and whatnot, I believe that would come from the fact that Superman isn't by himself. The weight of the world isn't on his shoulders. He's not Atlas in this world. And I'm having trouble as I'm thinking back to the film. I can't imagine what kind of a Batman he would be friends with, because he's still optimistic. He's still hopeful for people. And, Batman only exists because of that lack of hope. Like I was speaking to my wife and I was sort of analyzing like what made, like why I love the Zack Snyder films. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like one of those Snyder bots that's like, that's the end all be all, because I remember I loved Man of Steel when it came out. I loved Batman versus Superman when it came out. And, it's going to be controversial, but I actually loved Justice League, the theatrical cut when it came out, because that's what we had. That's the first time we saw these heroes together on screen, other than like a bad TV pilot movie from 97. And that was just like Flash and Green Lantern and like Martian Manhunter and I think Fire and Ice. And you had Legends of the Superheroes, two Super Friends like live action specials from the late 70s, which made them look really goofy, although it did bring back Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin. So it wasn't that bad. It's like a nice end cap to like their run as Batman and Robin until those animated films about a decade ago. So you have Man of Steel, and in Man of Steel, a lot of the complaints were like, he and Zod fighting and destroying Metropolis at the end of the film, and which is just like a Miracle Man comic that Alan Moore wrote back in the 80s when Miracle Man has to fight Kid Miracle Man grown up, and the one character doesn't care about human life. So what do you expect? There's going to be casualties and mass destruction trying to stop him. But then you have that scene where where Kal-El in Man of Steel snaps Zod's neck. And a lot of people don't like that because they're like, Superman doesn't do that. But if you think about it as that moment being for Superman what Bruce Wayne's parents being murdered in front of him was for Batman, you realize that the movie's called Man of Steel, not Superman, for a reason. He's Clark Kent. Then he finds out he's Kal-El. And because he has to kill someone and it goes against everything he was raised to believe in and who he is as a person, that's the moment that makes him Superman. And then when you watch Batman versus Superman and you watch Justice League, you realize why Superman is the way that he is and does what he does to avoid killing, because he had to kill one of the only people that could help him understand who he was. He had to lose his heritage twice, essentially. And so I see that. That's how I look at Man of Steel. Like, that's that moment. It's sort of like in Batman versus Superman, the Martha moment that everyone makes fun of is actually the most important moment in the film because it's when Batman, who has othered this illegal alien, realizes that he's just as human and just as flawed as he is because their moms have the same name. Like, how could someone who isn't like him have that in common with him? And I know it seems ridiculous, even from like a comic book point of view, but it's a really poignant part of the film where Batman snaps out of whatever fever, as I think Alfred calls it, he's in, to realize that what he's doing was wrong and that he needs to help this man because this man is here to help him as well. And he's just as, even in spite of all his powers, he still has human qualities. So I don't like, I don't like the fact that people now think that like the Zack Snyder movies are the end all be all when at the time they hated them. And I've loved them the whole time. So like if you didn't, spend the money to go see them when they were out, so they actually made money, so they would have kept making them, why are you bitching about it now? They're great films, and Zack Snyder's Justice League is even better, but you need the other two, the ultimate cut of BVS and Man of Steel, to make Zack Snyder's Justice League as regal as it, as it is, and how epic it is. But like, I can appreciate both, is what I'm saying. Like I love the Snyderverse stuff for what it was, because it seems to be like birthed in the same universe as Watchmen, since he directed that. So they're intentionally dark, I believe, because the world we live in is dark. I mean, just watch the news. They were essentially ahead of their time, and maybe that's why there's such a fan base for it now, because after BVS came out and it was about, billionaires manipulating the government, we had Trump elected the first time. So losing the popular vote and still somehow winning. So with James Gunn's Superman, there's still political messages in it, but it's almost like Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice, in the way that it's also laying a foundation for something in the future, but it does it after that foundation in this world has already been laid. So you're in the middle of something that's already existed for at least 3 years, if not longer, with the Justice Gang. So at least we know Superman's been around for 3 years. So it's not introducing these characters for the first time, even though in BVS, Batman was around for 20 years and no one else was. So you have this foundation being laid of other metahumans for an extended period of time, whether it's Shazam, because the Wizard was an ancient like Egyptian whatever with Black Adam and everything, or Wonder Woman from way back till present. You have an idea of there being more to it that they will flesh out later. And David Corenswet as Superman, his acting style, because I've never seen him in anything before this, and his acting style I think is great because it reminds me of the Mummy era Brendan Fraser, which the Mummy era Brendan Fraser is always fantastic. Just throw that out there. Check out Doom Patrol if you don't believe me. And that's just for his voice work in that. His acting in that is great, but it's mostly his voice work as Robot Man, that he's able to elicit so many emotions from the viewer. It's incredible. But Brendan Fraser, like the Mummy era Brendan Fraser, is like the epitome, I think, of his like action hero, swashbuckling status. And that's what David Corenswet like exudes for me as a viewer, like that kind of, like 26 years ago, because I guess it was 24 years ago was The Mummy Returns, and 26 would have been The Mummy. So, like late 90s, early aughts, Brendan Fraser, at the top of his game and able to balance humor and heart and romance and those things perfectly. And the new Superman suit is actually great too because it's. I went to see it with my daughter, and she said that she liked the fact that it's like the design of the entire film seems kind of retro, but also new at the same time. So there's this like retro nuovo vibe to it, and I think the suit is kind of like that because it almost seems like Art Deco the way that some of the designs on it are, and it reminds me of like some other suits. If you read like Future State, when like Superman was a few hundred or a few thousand years in the future, he had more of a Shazam slash Captain Marvel costume, and that's sort of what it reminds me of. So it's almost more of a ceremonial Kryptonian suit, if you're a nerd like I am. And it also kind of reminds me of like the suit that like Jonathan Kent had when he took over for Superman when Superman went off to fight on Warworld for a little while. And I admit I wasn't sure about it until I saw comic book artists drawing it. Like when you see Frank Whiteley drawing it, the guy who drew All Star Superman, you're like, oh, well, that suit's awesome. You see like Jorge Jimenez drawing it or Dan Mora, and you're just like, well, it's perfect because those guys draw a perfect Superman. And when they draw that suit for like either promo art or like variant covers, you could see why that suit works because the guys who know how to embody Superman with their pencils. Jim Lee drew a variant cover with that. And Jim Lee is one of the best comic book artists, at least of the past 40 years, if not ever. So, like, you can see when a good artist can draw a character they've drawn time and time again with a new suit and it looks perfect, that suit will be perfect. And David Cornsweet fills out the suit nicely. He has the Superman physique, he has the stature, he has the almost corny innocence that most people nowadays, I think, don't like about Superman. But I believe James Gunn handles the argument. This film is an argument as to why Superman is and should be relevant in this day and age, in spite of him being originally like a Depression era hero who fought against like racketeering and those kinds of things. And then as World War II started, because he came out in 1938, and then as World War II started, he fought fascism. He didn't embrace fascism as freedom as most people are nowadays. He fought against it. And I think this film shows perfectly why Superman would do that, because it shows his roots, not necessarily his Kryptonian roots, but who he grew up with. And when you see who he grew up with, and it doesn't do much of a backstory because a lot of us already know it. If we haven't already seen Smallville, it's only been around for 24 years and there's only 10 seasons to watch, but a stellar show. Tom Welling, Michael Rosenbaum, incredible. They, James Gunn shows that they instilled in him values, and honestly, what we used to think of as American values. And I guess maybe that's the deeper, more lasting question about this film. What do we value as American? Because I saw a thing where on Fox News they were complaining. Kellyanne Conway, of all people, was complaining about how super woke this Superman movie is. I don't believe she saw it because why would she? Because James Gunn pointed out the obvious thing that Superman is an immigrant. And I guess that upset people in spite of the fact that He is literally an illegal alien who came from another planet and was adopted and raised and kind of learned truth, justice, and the American way. Even though they dumped that for Superman's son when they said truth, justice, and a better tomorrow, but a better tomorrow, why can't that encompass the American way? Why can't the American dream be the American way? Because that would have been, back in the 40s, I believe the 40s and the 50s is when they started saying that for like the radio show, the movie serial starring Kirk Allen, actually both of them, and the George Reeves TV show. So I think this film should make people question what they value as the American way and as truth and justice, because we know what Superman values is that, and he's steadfast in it and unwavering. And he seems to be the only one who actually knows what truth, justice, and the American way, how those three things can lead to a better tomorrow for everyone. And Fox News, I guess I didn't watch the segment, but I've been seeing things about it. And I don't think they understand that it's not really woke to state the obvious. But if it is, why would you want to be asleep? I guess that's the question. And anyway, Superman is a great film. It's your typical superhero story, but the way that things happen and the way that other characters are introduced and the world is built in a tight like 2 hours and 9 minutes. It's great. There's not, if you've seen the Guardians films, there's not any like, what do they call them, needle drops, because the Guardians films are more about the soundtracks, really. And the one thing about this film and its soundtrack is they, with like some of the font for the credits and some of the music, they use like John Williams' iconic Superman theme. And if you're a fanboy like I am, whether it's Indiana Jones, Star Wars, or Superman, when you hear like that John Williams, those notes start up, you kind of get like your heart kind of gets like, you feel it, and you should get teary eyed. That's my patriotism right there to comic books. But so the needle drop moments in this film are more like when you hear the Superman theme in some form playing, and it's just like that it's evoking the spirit of what Richard Donner and Christopher Reeve did back in '78, and the groundwork Richard Donner laid for 1981 for Superman 2. And it's just incredible. And I think as far as like a modern update of Superman, but still keeping with everything that we love about Superman, I think James Gunn succeeded admirably. And if I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to take Dom's thing from Don't Forget the Popcorn. I would honestly rate it probably a 9. And I want it, and a 9.0. And I want to watch it again and again and again so I can kind of see, because like Jimmy Olsen is great in it, Lois Lane is great in it, Perry White as little as he's in it, he's great. Like all the supporting cast is great because they all have pre-existing relationships. So we have to see where they're going to go from here and how they're going to flesh out like maybe what happened before or what happens in the future. I'm excited either way because it's brighter in spite of the world we live in, and I think that's a good thing. On that note, I thank everyone, and I will see you next week with the cutting room floor. This has been a cutting room floor quickie.